We'll get started. So welcome. This is another great EO webinar that we've had for EO Minnesota, and we've had fantastic attendance for all of these webinars. Today we have Insperity, Pandemics Box. Now that we're working remote, how do we bring them back? And I'm assuming them are the people that work for us. And yeah, okay. I was going to make a joke, but I was told not to make any jokes, so I will refrain from that. But we have Courtney Howard, Jill Chapman, and Sally Piney. And they are here to give us a fantastic webinar. But I'm going to hand it over to Glenda, who is our fearless EO Minnesota admin leader. And she has some announcements to make and telling us all about what's coming up in the future.
Right. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on board, and we're really lucky to have the experts here. As you heard, a little jealous that she's coming to us from Hawaii, but at least Courtney and Sally can feel our pain. I know many of you have met them because they come to our events. I did want to remind you that tonight is a really fun event we're having in conjunction with the Indianapolis and Wisconsin chapters with Dave Rendell. And he is the guy that is the Freak Factor guy. So we've got an evening event starting at 7, and that's Discovering Uniqueness by Flaunting Your Weakness. So that should be really fun. And then another couples event on Monday the 18th at 8 o'clock, and that's with Brian Brault. Many of you know him from different trainings. He's a facilitator for forum summits and forum trainings. And then his wife, and then Jamie and Caddy Doherty, they're also very tenured EO members, and they're going to speak to us about couples conversation in stressful times. Then we've got Chicago member Mike Strata talking on the 28th on marketing strategy, tactics, and data science. And then a really exciting one we've got coming for families on June 1st, the evening, starting at 7 o'clock. And that's on digital well-being, which is pretty relevant, obviously, right now. And that's balanced and intentional use of screens. So there's a questionnaire that comes with that, and I would love for anybody that's attending to fill that out, just so we can really, gear it towards what you want to learn on how to stay balanced with all the digital that's out there. So I am going to hand this over to Courtney, and you can introduce the presenters, and welcome and thank you.
Actually, Glenda, I'm going to kick us off. This is Sally Piney. I just first of all want to thank the EO members and their employees for your interest in today's topic. A lot's changed for many of us over the last 2 months, and I think I heard it best represented as we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. So no matter what boat you're in, at Insperity, we're dedicated to helping your business prosper, taking care of the things that can be distracting you from your bigger picture. So Insperity, throughout our comprehensive PEO service, we help provide administrative relief, access to better healthcare benefits, reduce liabilities, and dedicated HR support from our experienced service team, which you're going to hear from one of those today, Jill. And as a business leader, this gives you the ability to spend more time on doing what you love, which is growing your business. So thank you all for attending. Courtney is now going to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thanks, Sally, and thanks, everyone. So fun to be here and have some personal connection. The topic is obviously very relevant, and we're so lucky to have Jill Chapman with us to talk about working remotely the right way. She's coming to us from Maui. Thanks for that, Jill. So Jill's background is super impressive. She's a senior performance consultant with Insperity. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin, a master's degree in HR management from Tarleton State University, and multiple HR certifications in addition to 25 plus years experience in the HR and recruiting industry. She has been used as an expert and quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CBS MarketWatch, and has worked with clients such as Marriott, Fox Sports, and Monster.com. So we're really lucky to have her. Jill, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, mahalo. Thanks so much. So are you guys suitably impressed with all those credentials there? But what we're going to talk about today is probably a higher level view than, I know you can get some webinars about, this is how you set yourself up as we begin to return to work. And, phase 1 should look like this, and you should have this kind of PPE equipment, and phase 2 is going to look like that. And I want to take the conversation a little bit broader, if you will, more broad, to talk about kind of where we're sitting right now and to look at the future and think about the things that are going to affect us, so that as we begin to plan with those phases of coming back into the office, we can talk about the tactical in one conversation, but we need to think about the tactical in terms of what this is going to look like on the other side. What sorts of things are going to stick with us, and what sorts of things are going to change dramatically. We've been in this national experiment now for what, 2 months, 3 months, for some of us. And so we've settled into a certain rhythm, I think, already, but it's about to change again. I was just looking at the newspaper, and last night, I think, Minnesota was talking about they're going to let the stay-at-home order expire, but things are going to be slow in recovering and coming back, starting first with some retailers, but it's still, not foreseen exactly when the restaurants and those sorts of things will start to open up. So right now is a great time to be thinking about, what does the future possibly hold for us? What are those think tanks talking about for the future, and how can we build in or bake into our plans right now something for the future? So just in a nutshell, these are the sorts of things that we're going to talk about. We'll talk about now where we sit, how we need to work with our teams. Most of them, like most of our organizations across the country, have been sent home. But how do we communicate in this time of flux again, as we flux and try to come back into the office? We'll talk a little bit about structure and process, how it changed dramatically a few weeks ago. It's getting ready to change again. And then just a minute or so on the idea of compassion, which has always been important, right? But probably never more so than right now. And then, as I said, we'll talk about some of the most discussed changes for our future state. That around the idea of a flexible future for our organizations, work-life balance. What's that really going to look like? Is it balance or blend? I don't really know. Talk a couple of minutes about travel and real estate and how that is going to look different on the other side. HR practices. I would be remiss as an HR girl if I didn't talk about HR practices moving forward. And then thinking about the employees' expectations. We need to give some airtime, if you will, to their expectations for the future, for their careers, for them personally, and for their expectations of their employers, for sure. Sustainability, I think that needs to be part of the conversation. And we've got just a couple of recommendations for COVID-19 and life after the pandemic, when we go to whatever it's going to look like post-pandemic. And really, really want to gin up some of your questions, because I think this is most valuable. If we can share information and ideas back and forth and innovate in this time. This is the time, right, for entrepreneurs to really step up and step out and do things that we count on entrepreneurs to do. So it's your day, it's your time. So where do we sit right now? Well, of course, communication has never been more important, probably, than it is right now with our teams, because they're out of sight, they're remote, they're scattered all over the place. So communication is our way, is the linkage between all of us, and that's at the heart of successfully managing remote teams. But it's at the heart of everything that we do, right? I will tell you that as we've watched companies move to a work from home arrangement, and sometimes in the companies that didn't have that prior, we've seen some things. We've been able to observe some ways that managers are managing that maybe we overlooked because we were all in the same space, or it didn't seem quite as obvious. But it appears that we've had managers kind of fall on two different ends of the spectrum. We either have those micromanagers who are all in their people's stuff all the time, so much so that we're hearing from employees saying, I can't get my work done for having to answer about what I just did the last 5 minutes. And really undermining a sense of trust between the management and the employees. The other side of the coin is that absentee manager, that manager that's missing in action now. Probably handled their business a lot like that when we were in the office, but it probably wasn't such a stark contrast because we knew that they were down the hall and we could always pop our head in and ask a question. So we're finding that we're at either ends of the spectrum. And we really need to push to the middle and the right amount of communication, but communicating is going to be key, especially as we begin to announce changes again in how we're going to do our work. If we're bringing people back into the office, we've got to be able, we have to have those channels of communication open. And then structure. You know, before the pandemic, there had been a number of surveys done for people who, knowledge workers particularly, who thought, like 95% of them were saying, I should work from home. But like, there's nothing that I do that I can't do from my home workplace. And quite frankly, work from home has been a thing ever since the internet was invented, right? But like to the tune of almost 100% of these people thought, I should be able to work from home. Well, now that they're home, they're like, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And they're noticing how distracted they can possibly be. Some of that is because it's not a typical work from home situation. There may not be the opportunity to create a workspace, or there may be a workspace, but there's also 2 children, a partner, and a dog in that same space, right? So we have to help our people to bake in or build in some of that structure for them. And as we start to pivot, as we start to change the way that we're going to do this, some working from home, some coming back into the office, but we're yet again changing a little bit of our model. We've got to help to build in the structure as we make those changes. Can't leave it to chance, because when we leave it to chance, our efficiency is definitely going to suffer. I don't know if you guys felt it, but you know, right as we were announcing the stay-at-home orders and that sort of thing, it felt like we all lost about a week or so of productivity, right? Because everybody's like, what is going on? We were very concerned about the pandemic, so most of us were glued to the news and that sort of thing. But we lost about a week of productivity, I think, for all of our organizations as people tried to adjust. So let's not lose that time in the aftermath of the pandemic. Let's be proactive in how we think about it. And again, never not important, but compassion, motivation, more important now than ever. You know, as we start to loosen up a little bit, you're going to have people on, talk about a spectrum. You're going to have people on either ends. You've got some of your employees that most likely are fearful, very afraid. Maybe they're afraid for themselves. Maybe they're afraid for someone in their close proximity that's part of the more fragile community. But for whatever reason, they are very, very afraid. You have other people on the other end going, this is a hoax. This isn't even real. This is like, you know, I'm not believing any of this. And, you know, who's going to tell me that I have to stay home? So you have both sides of that. And nobody's right and nobody's wrong in this, because this is how they're feeling, right? So we have to be compassionate about where they're at, even if they don't feel about this pandemic the same way we do, but to really clue in on our emotional intelligence, right? And know what's going on with our folks and how to best respond. I'm so proud of my company, Insperity. We have always held as one of our core values, respect for the individual. And as we start talking about coming back into the office, that's a cornerstone of how we begin to build our plans and thinking about coming back, is that we all have to respect each other. You wear a mask, not because of yourself, you wear a mask to respect someone else, right, in your work group. So if somebody is, fearful and coming back into the office, they're okay to come back, but they still have a lot of anxiety or some questions about it. Being respectful of other people's opinions and holding ourselves in carrying ourselves in such a way that we can be compassionate about, because that's the heart of keeping somebody motivated, right? Fear can do a lot of things to people, and one of them is to shut them down. So in order to keep our folks as productive as we need them to be, we have to be compassionate towards the situation that they're sitting in right now. And really, why is this so important? Well, if we're going to keep some of our team remote for the foreseeable future, We've had some of our team remote. I think it's important to understand the dynamics of work from home on our employees pre-pandemic, but I am sure that in this time, the numbers are maybe even more exacerbated in this time. But Fast Company did a survey, and they looked at the folks that were working remote, and they talked to people in the US and the UK about their experiences working remote. 95% of the employees that were polled said they had never felt more connected to their coworkers. They had a great relationship with their coworkers. They were doing the Zoom happy hours and the, looking at everybody's crib and all that. But they had really kind of gelled and found a way to work together and to stay connected as a team using Slack channels or Teams or whatever technologies that they might use to be able to collaborate and virtual high fives and that sort of thing. But what they also responded is that they felt to the tune of only about 15% felt connected to their management, felt connected to their, that's huge, right? And then even less felt connected to their C-suite. I think the number was around 3%. So why is that important? Well, when I lack visibility, when I feel like I don't have a voice anymore, my opportunities to participate, my engagement drops, and there goes my ideation, my creativity, my innovation. And at a time like this, we need that more than we need anything, right? How can we do this better? How can we do this differently? How are we going to get through this to the other side? We need everybody's innovation. We need everybody's creativity. And so that's why it's important to understand these things as we move forward so that we can keep that connection with our employees and we can keep them working to create on behalf of our organization. So that's kind of where we are right now, the kinds of big things that we're thinking about. But on the other side of this, what's it going to look like? What are some of the things that we need to consider in our future state? And again, about the flexibility, about how are we going to manage our people and our workplaces, HR practices for sure. Kind of turn the focus to the employees and what's going on in their heads right now. And for the future, and then spend just a few moments on sustainability. So when we talk about the flexible future and the work life, all this kind of goes together. I think that there were a number of companies that would say, yeah, we're not doing the remote thing. We all need to be in the office. And we found out we don't. We don't necessarily have to be. There are some things that have to be done in person at the site, those essential workers that we found, but a good number of us could take our work home and did take our work home in this. So I don't think we'll ever be able to go back to those days where we slammed our fist on the desk and said, you must be here in the morning, you must be here at the end of the day. I think there will be an expectation of flexibility in the future. As we've all said, not all of us want to stay working from home, right? Like some of us don't like it. I've had the opportunity to work remote for the last year or so. I still go into the office when I can. I need that connection. I need that, and those that are the most extroverted on your teams are going to want to come back, or they're going to want ways to connect in person in real life. But you're going to have some that really have appreciated this time, that have thought, I'm much more productive. There's less chit chat. I can get my work done. I was talking to a group, and one of the comments that was made was from a girl who said, I love this working from home because when I'm at work and some of the extroverts in my office, they just take up all the oxygen, right? And I thought that was a great picture for how people are going to be on either ends of the spectrum about working from home. But I think that a flexibility in our policies and in our programs is going to be the expectation. And hey, look, it's been proven out that we can actually do this and be successful in most cases. So why not? It's turned us into kind of a results-only workforce, I would say. It's all about the deliverables now, right? Doesn't matter necessarily what time you do it. Doesn't matter where you sit to do it, but do you get your work done? I think that with a flexible future comes perhaps an opportunity for us to rebalance some workloads. I think that was another thing that came up, is that we found that some people are overwhelmed with a lot of tasks and responsibility. And when we go remote, we found that some people maybe didn't have enough to do. So in building out this future of flexibility, I think workload balancing is probably part and parcel of to that, because I think we begin to think more like it's not about how much the face time, it's not about the number of hours that you work, it's more about the deliverables and meeting those requirements of the role. And so I think we need to start thinking like that, right? And I would say that a lot of people have found some silver linings in this whole idea of the work-life balance. Those of us who commuted into work are finding some time back in our day, time that we could spend with family or friends, and are appreciative of that. And has also figured out how to make this all balance with having people at home in our workspace that we also have to give attention to, perhaps even during the work day. My hat goes off to these people with little kids that have tried to do this and school the children and do their work and be attentive when they need to be attentive, and have made it all work. In some cases, it meant that they did the schoolwork during the day, and when the kids went to bed, that's when the bulk of their work got done. But it still got done. And so, great kudos to those to those folks. So there is a certain amount of comfort in working from home to be able to have that access to life outside of work. But one of the flip side of that is we also need to allow opportunity for our employees to unplug, right? I dare say that most of us on this phone call have probably responded to an email at 11 o'clock at night, did one more report just because we're sitting in the same space at night that we're sitting in during the day. We're looking at our computer and we're like, if I just knock that out now, I'll get that off my plate. But we're going to have to build in, remember how I was talking about structure? There needs to be some structure around the idea of when it's okay to shut off. And that kind of goes back to that communication bit as well, right? Because what we found is, as leaders, we may think about, we're thinking about work all the time, right? We're thinking about work at 12 o'clock at night. We're thinking about work at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we may feel the need to shoot out an email or, work on a little bit of work in the night. Now, if I'm up at 2 o'clock and I'm shooting off some emails, I have no expectation that my employees are going to jump up at 2 o'clock and respond to me, right? I just need to get it off my plate and onto somebody else's, and it's totally cool if they wait till 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to look at it and work with it. But without that sense of communication, where I talk to employees and I say, look, I work weird hours, I do weird things. You're going to get some emails from me at weird times. Don't feel compelled that you have to immediately respond just because you saw an email from me. Use your best judgment. But yet, without that communication, we have employees that are fearful of ever shutting off their computer for fear that they're going to miss something from their leadership, from their management. So I think we need to make sure that we're cognizant of how that blend can create situations that we don't want. We don't want our employees feeling burdened like that. We need to give them time to recharge their batteries and do things on their own. And so just being aware of these sorts of things, that there's unintended consequences, and thinking about the what ifs as we move back to a new way post-pandemic. I think it's going to be important for us to talk about travel and real estate. We've done a lot, right, in the most recent weeks without the amount of travel that maybe we used before. I do think that that's going to be something as leaders that we have to look at moving forward. Something for a group like EO to think about is, how are travel budgets going to look? How are accommodations going to look on the other side of things? It's real easy for me to throw out, hey, did you know I work in Maui? Did you know I live in Maui? That's easy to roll off my lips. But do you know Maui has completely shut down from a travel perspective? There are no resorts open. There are very limited hotels open. And if the ones that are open have like a floor open, not the entire hotel. And you can't travel here. Like there are 4 flights coming onto my island every week. And so that creates a lot of opportunity for us to get clever and creative about other ways to do things. And I think we'll embrace that. And so, as your team comes to you about doing this or doing that, or feeling like they need to get FaceTime with that client, is it going to be as necessary? We've learned some technologies. Is it going to be as necessary for us to continue to travel to the extent that we did pre-pandemic? I think some of us are going to say no. I think there's still going to be need for some essential business travel, but it's going to be limited. And I think we're all going to be taking a hard look at it when people come to us with expenses in that arena. Same thing for real estate. We've moved, spent the last, 10 years, 15 years or so talking about the open concept. Everybody wants open concept in their homes. They want open concept in the office. They want to be able to move from the beanbag to the sofa to the little work table. And back and forth again. You think post-pandemic people are going to want to do that? You think I'm really going to want to sit at that little work table right across from you? And what if you cough? And so I know a lot of organizations have been very busy in this time trying to write their open concept to create more private spaces, to create that physical distance between people and make it a safe environment for their employees to return to. So, are we going to continue to design office space the way that we have? Are we going to need to continue to design office space, right? That's the big $64,000 question. Do we need the square footage that we've had in the past? Can we repurpose it for other things? But if we start telling people they need to work from home, do we offload some of that commercial real estate budget that we've had into subsidizing their work from home, their internet, their maybe the room, the square footage, their utility bills, some things like that, to be able to create an opportunity for them to work from home. When we first initiated work from home, it was more about being a privilege. That was the way it was seen. And so we had some rules that said, if you want to work from home, your internet needs to be at this speed, you have to have this in place. And we were all willing to do it as employees because we were like, hey, it's a benefit. They're allowing me this opportunity to work from home. If we mandate that people work from home, I think the attitudes might change a little bit, and the expectations for how the employer makes us whole if we're doing that sort of thing is going to be there. So I think travel and real estate are two areas that are going to be really under the microscope as to how we're going to set ourselves right post-pandemic from a budgeting standpoint, an expense management standpoint. Again, got to talk about HR practices because those are changing as I'm sitting here, right? Policies have had to change. Procedures have had to change to accommodate the work from home. They'll change again when we move into the post-pandemic. HR is still happening even in light of the pandemic. So it doesn't make us immune to the laws of the land and the expectations for HR to follow regulations and laws. But I do think that there's some things that I've thought about as we've traveled this road. We have less people in confined spaces, if you will, or all in one location. I think we're going to have less opportunity to need to do investigations and deal with some of those employee relations issues that come up when people are all kind of together. And so this may free up our HR people to look at things more strategically and not to be so stretched thin because they're so worried or working on these issues and investigations within our workplace that they can actually be more strategic in their involvement and their plans for the future. I also think that we've watched a lot of headlines, right, through this pandemic, and we've watched how people have responded to the pandemic. We've seen the groans from those companies that laid people off via Zoom meetings, or I heard one last night of a company that said, here's a list. If your name is not on this list, expect a call from us in the next 4 hours. You'll no longer be working here. Oh, what? There's some good practices and there's some bad practices around how we might furlough or lay people off. And there's a lot of publicity, and your employment brand goes along with that. We've also had a lot of companies that have done some very right things, and they've been lauded in the media, and their employment brand has been elevated. through this sort of thing. Some of it came around the idea of internships, and I don't know how many of you guys had opportunities for interns, but those companies, I think, that have maintained some semblance of an internship are going to be in better situations for the future for their college recruiting and their pipeline of talent when they've been able to keep those things open. One thing that I'm struck with is that I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the Davos Manifesto. So you know how major organizations, think tanks, and financiers go to Switzerland every year and talk about the fourth industrial revolution and think the big things for the future. Well, this year, something that HR has been talking about a long time, but it was kind of a win for HR because these major players, global major players, all signed off on what we call the Davos Manifesto. And it's basically saying that everyone that touches your organization is important. Not just your investors, not just your shareholders, but everybody, your employees, your customers, your vendor partners, your community, your the academic or the academic institutions in your area, the government, everybody's important. Everybody has a place. And they signed that in February, right? Here comes the pandemic. We're all kind of pushed to prove it, right? If you signed off on it, you better prove it, that you really care about your employees, you really care about your customers, you really care about your vendor partners. And what a great time to shine. There was a great article in Forbes about this very thing, where they were outing those companies that have done it right. And I think from that, our HR groups are going to identify some best practices for working with our folks in the future. But I'm here to say there's going to be a lot of policies, there's going to be a lot of regulations that are changing, and your HR people are going to have to stay current with those sorts of things as we move through this, making sure that everything still makes sense in a post-pandemic world. And then a couple of other things that I would want to talk about. You know, my background is in recruiting and talent attraction. And while we have seen inordinate number of people laid off during this pandemic, we've also seen some industries that are actually hiring. I got teary-eyed on a call on Monday, and I was on a call with some of our recruiters. And our recruiters, in this case, that were on the meeting, we're all working with our clients around the country. And we were talking about something completely off topic. But can I tell you that during that call, which lasted maybe about 45 minutes, 5 people had to jump off the call because the reason was, I just got a ping and one of my clients wants to make an offer. I got teary-eyed. I was like, look, people are getting hired in the pandemic. Look, things are happening. We are, we're getting to a new place, and people are starting to think about the futures of their organizations. And that made me so excited. And yes, we still have those communities and those industries in which they've been ravaged by the layoffs and the furloughs. But I think when we get on the other side and the economy heat up a little bit and things start to, people do begin to think longer term about their organizations and their needs, I think employees are going to look at jobs a little bit differently. And I think it would be smart to think about these sorts of things. We've bandied about this term called essential employees, right? Were you somebody who is deemed essential, or are you considered non-essential in times like this? I can tell you, if I was considered non-essential, I'm going to be taking a hard look at what it was that I was doing that was so easy to be released from my employer. That was so easy to be sent home. Not sent home to work, but sent home and with no opportunity. And am I going to want to stay in that industry? Am I going to want to stay in that kind of role or responsibility? Think not. Think I might be looking at those people who were deemed essential and how do I get one of those jobs? So we may see some roles, we may see some contraction in our talent pools as we clamor to try to bring these people back, and they're saying, no, don't want to come back to that. I'm going to use this time to upskill, reskill, and do something different. And as employers, is there not an opportunity there for us to help some of those people to reskill or upskill so that they are prepared for their futures as well as ours, right? If we were able to shed that many people Was it because we had people that weren't that our company wasn't brittle to, or was brittle to these kinds of situations? So from a succession planning standpoint, from a future workforce planning standpoint, is it important to us to take back some of these people, reskill, or change how they do their job so that we can stand stronger in the next natural disaster, the next pandemic, the next economic crisis, because we have people deployed in different ways, in better ways for the future. But I think that there are going to be some hygiene factors for employees or potential employees for your organization, some things that they're going to look at. I know a lot of them are going to ask, how did you handle the pandemic? What'd you do to your employees? How did you weather that storm? And that will be a decision maker for them, a deciding factor for whether they're going to align with an organization or not. So from a brand perspective of how we're going to talk to that potential future workforce, we need to be able to articulate the hows and whys of our responses during the pandemic. I think people are going to be looking for that. I think they're also going to have a certain expectation around that flexible future. And if you are going to be able to provide that, how are you also providing for that work-life balance? So these things that we've talked about are going to be very precious, I think, to employees as they make decisions. You know, some of our employees are probably hanging with us right now because they feel like they don't have other options. It's sort of like in a, if we had an economic downturn without all this extra stuff stacked on top of it, we've all seen when we've given an employee multiple jobs, that don't necessarily align with their their job description, where we have a controller who's now also answering the phone and taking the trash out on Tuesdays, so that they can keep their job, so that we can keep them gainfully employed. Well, when things lighten up, those people that we've given random odd jobs to are not going to be willing to do that in the future, because they can go somewhere else where they can get a job that aligns more with their skills and abilities or their desires for the future. So I think we have to be attuned to that as well. And lastly, let's talk just a few minutes about sustainability. I think that that's going to be key in the future. It's true. We're breathing better air, right? We've reduced the carbon footprint of our companies through our employees commuting less, perhaps with some of the shutdown, we're using less resources within our organizations. And it is true, it's demonstrable that we are breathing better air. So let me just tell you, did you know I work on Maui? But on Maui, we've seen the coral reefs are coming back. We've seen schools of fishes that haven't been in our coastal waters for a long time. Things are changing. You guys have probably seen pictures of the dolphins that have come back into Venice. There are real things happening with Mother Earth, and I think that moving forward, we need to take account of that. And how can we move forward and keep this fresh air and keep our waters cleaner and more pure, and maybe not do some of the damage, because it's very clear how quickly some things were able to recover. So how can we stay on this? And so our corporate social responsibility footprint, right? Those expectations, again, when we talk about employee expectations, they may very well ask you, from a sustainability standpoint, what are you doing? What are you continuing to do? Because that's going to be important moving forward. It's kind of an interesting topic, but I think that this is going to cause that. Over the past few years, we've been talking about it a lot, but like a lot of things that we did a lot of talking about, work from home. Oh, that sounds like a cool idea. Oh, corporate social responsibility. Oh, that sounds neat. Work-life balance. Oh, that's a good idea. The pandemic has forced us further faster than we ever hoped to go. I do a lot of reading about the workforce of 2030. And when I go in and look at some of those old documents now, I'm like, the workforce of 2030 is here in 2020. And so, sustainability is another one of those factors that we were talking about from a corporate standpoint, that stuff is important. It's going to be even more important as we move forward. So what do we do? What do we have to think about? And again, you can get plenty of education about building in your phases for how you return to work. But these are some overarching ideas to think about our systems and tools that we've employed during this this time, especially as we sent people home to work, and how we had to add some channels that we didn't possibly, perhaps have before then. And in some cases, maybe we threw some stuff together just to make it work. But moving forward, were those the best options for us? So we're looking at our tools and our systems to make sure that they're going to support us in a long-range plan for what we're going to look like post-pandemic. Whether those are collaboration tools, things that you found that worked well, things that are a little glitchy, or maybe that we kind of patchworked a lot of things together and they're really not working together as well as we need them to. So do we need to build some Band-Aids in there, or do we need to look at bigger, better tools? Our network capabilities, we've all been on those calls where we're losing things and people drop off and we have too much and too little. And from a security standpoint as well, right? With sending everybody home, we're not as locked down as we once were. And so looking at our network capabilities, again, with the policies and procedures, that's going to be huge, right? We're changing our procedures all the time. But we need to make sure that our policies are in line with these new procedures. So whether that's policies on telecommuting, the security of remote access, looking at our succession plans and our business continuity plans. Some of us were probably left holding the bag, right? That some of the things that we found ourselves in, certainly uncharted waters, but did we have a plan for a response, regardless of what disaster is in front of us? So looking at our business continuity plans so that next time we'll have some procedures and people and processes in place. This probably has shone a light on our plans, on our succession plans, right? Some of those people that we might have thought would be the kinds of folks that could step up. We're finding that their reactions in times like this are maybe not what we're looking for in the future. We might have had some people who did step up and performed in stellar ways and really were able to rally our troops and keep things moving. But so many times, wartime generals don't make great peacetime generals, right? So taking a hard look at that as well. So just thinking about these things. And that's really what I want to do today, is just kind of tease up some of these thoughts so that as you move forward, these are considerations for you. And again, with the ROI calculators, I think everything, we're all looking at our expenses everywhere to try to make the best out of our situation and to kind of protect ourselves in these uncertain times. But I definitely think travel and real estate will be one of those that we take the hardest lines and the hardest looks at what we can do without moving forward and how we need to augment those budgets. So with that, do we have any questions? I love to take questions, and I hope that there are some. I did get some questions the other day, too, that I thought were really thought-provoking, and I can kind of talk about some of those things if time allows.
And Jill, I'm going to go make everybody unmuted so people can just go ahead and ask questions as they would like, or allow them to ask. I think everybody is muted by default when I allow you to talk, but if you would like to ask questions, I'm going to go through and allow everybody to talk. And there's also a QA box on the bottom that you can go ahead and ask questions. I see Susan Peterson has a question. How do I move to Maui?
You get your husband to get a job on Maui. Was my answer. But yeah, it's been really, really cool. It's a great opportunity. I will tell you, Maui's hurting right now. The economy is hurting. Way too invested in tourism to be able to withstand storms like this. However, there are companies that are still hiring, and in the when we're not locked down, they are always looking for people on Maui. I'm telling you, especially people white collar jobs on Maui.
All right.
have 2 or 3 jobs to be able to afford to live here. But they are, it is a booming market generally for folks.
Great. Yeah, just to reiterate, everybody is allowed to speak, but you're going to have to unmute yourself to talk.
One of the things that, because we are experiencing so much change in our everyday, I was having a conversation with somebody, and they brought up this whole idea of change management and what does change management look like, especially from a culture standpoint, from how we're doing things with people either being remote or just how how physical distance impacts change management, I guess, if you will. And I think, I'm not sure that it does have that much to do with it from, just how you enact change management, right? There's processes for that, in finding your sponsors, and whether they're sitting in the same building or they're scattered across the globe. That's what makes successful change, right? Is finding those cheerleaders, finding those visible and active sponsors for whatever change you're trying to roll out. I also think that it's really important that that we rely on that culture that has knitted us together before we got here, right? Those characteristics that that were germane to our organizations, and making sure that whatever changes we're augmenting are in alignment with those employee characteristics, right? That speak to those sorts of things. I'm going to use my company as another example. As we begin to prepare to not go back to work, because we've all been working, but to go back to the workplace. And we had a conversation with our CEO on Monday, which he began to talk about this plan. That is something else that I have to give him kudos. He has been so visible throughout this this season for all of our employees, with such a calming and actually encouraging presence that has been great for us. So if you have not been communicating with your folks, I would highly encourage that you get out in front of this and don't let other people dilute your message, and you be the person in charge. But as we began to move back, we're talking about our return to the workplace as principled, as opposed to a lot of rules and regulations. And I think that part of the reason for that is that's how we live our everyday life. We give people their lanes that we expect them to stay in, but we give them latitude within those lanes, as though we've decided that we're all hiring adults, right? And so that everybody that works for us is an adult, and they should be able to make adult type decisions. But as opposed to laying down a bunch of rules and regulations, our organization is laying down principles or guidance, and then it's up to the individual to walk along, to figure out how that looks for them and their team and their workplaces. So I think aligning those change initiatives with how we see things as an employee base or as a work group in the first place, and then again to the communication. I can't talk about anything without talking about the value of communication, and especially as it goes to change management. Things start to change and you're not communicating. What do people do? They make it up, right? And they always make it up worse than what the reality would be. So being out front with those communications is key.
Jill, could you talk a little bit about the importance of having video meetings as opposed to just not like typing or even
email or IM or something? Yeah. So we all know, we've all heard, we've all been to those public speaking classes or whatever, where they talk about communication and what percentages of this and that. And so it's no secret that what we say is about 7% of what the person takes in, right? The words that you say are only about 7% of what this person pays attention to, right? And then we have 30, I can't do the math in my head and I can't really remember the stats, but somewhere in the 30% range is, high 30% is the inflection of your voice, the words that you choose to say what you're saying, and so the language that you choose, but the tone of your voice, that takes in another 35%, to the extent that I could say, I love you, 14 different ways, very quiet, very shy, like very boisterous, and it would resonate differently with you every time I changed my tone of voice or my inflection. But a full 50-something% is our body language, right? And so when we take out that opportunity for people to see how we're sitting, if we're using our hands, or we're being very energetic in our talk, where are we looking? How are we looking? Are we smiling? Are we sad? What's our body language telling? That's how people get the entire message. So that opportunity to add that layer of video into your communications really helps to make sure that your audience is hearing what you intended, right? The more that you take away those layers of communication, the less likely you are to make an impact with whatever it is that you're talking about.
That's great. Thank you. I know that one thing that is going to be an issue in the future, everybody's used to working remote now, but from a team standpoint, especially in the programming world, it does help for everybody to be together. Mm-hmm. But I think some people don't realize how much it helps because they're not looking at it from a higher level. Do you have some recommendations on how we can educate team members on the importance of, hey, you should be coming into the office X amount of times every week when we can, because this is how much better our right. Communications go, because we're in person.
And so you hit right on it when you said the because, right? I believe people will do all sorts of things for you if they understand the why, and if that why resonates with them, right? If we're, as an organization, saying you need to come in because we work better and that's going to make our company more money, which is what's going to happen, right? But I think when we're talking to particularly our younger generations that are working for us, company making more money doesn't necessarily resonate with them, right? The things that the company does with the money, that resonates. So to be able to explain the why, a lot of times when I'm consulting with organizations, and I particularly, I relate to those people who have gray hair like me, and come from my place, my perceptions of being a poster child for a baby boomer generation, right? And so when I do some consulting, I'm still getting these people who are wringing their hands about the younger generations, which have now been here for 10 years now, particularly with the millennial generation. And then the Zs that are coming up behind them are even more different. So go figure. But I think with everyone that we've reared as baby boomers, the way that we did our parenting was to describe to them the why, to have conversations with people, not just to do it because I said so, but here's why I want you to do that, to try to enlist their cooperation. And anything that we needed them to do, largely because baby boomers were working and they were tired and they just didn't want to have a fight. So if they could spin the chores or spin the homework or spin whatever in a way that resonated with the kid, maybe the kid would do things, more. And that's grown up and now come to work. And so I see people that are frustrated saying, I can't get them to do anything. I can't get them to do blah, blah, blah. Well, it's because you don't slow down long enough to explain the why behind it, because I guarantee you Generation Y, which is written like Y, the letter, is also known as Generation Y, as in why do we have to do it that way? And so I think to be able to articulate the whys will go a long way in getting that buy-in and that understanding for why it's important to the organization and to them as individuals. To participate face-to-face or in real life.
Well, that's great. That's great. Very much.
Okay. Jill, thanks so much for your time. We sure appreciate it. And what typically happens is the minute we end a webinar, people come up with questions. So I probably will be forwarding some.
Right. And to that, there's my contact information. It's
Okay.
very clear that I can talk a lot about things. I love to think about and noodle these ideas and kind of paint the picture for what the future trends might be. So if you want to continue the conversation, I'm certainly happy for anybody to reach out and talk.
We appreciate that. We have a very good partner with Insperity at Minnesota. And just real quick, I forgot to thank our other partners, GPM, Eide Bailly, Fidelity Bank, Patterson Tinty, RBC Wealth, and CLP Digital Marketing and Vision to Traction. So we are one lucky chapter to have some really strong partners that are so willing to spend time to help us out. So thank you once again. And then one more quick plug for tonight. We've got the Freak Factor. So if you haven't registered for that, please do so and share with your forum mates and employees. And next week is more to come, so check out my signature. And anything else, one last chance before we end this webinar. Jill, Sally, Courtney, and I see Dave jumped on at one point, Dave Bruni. I'm not sure if he's there now, but really, really appreciate your time and your, like I say, your partnership with EO.
Yeah, and just
Got
to,
a quiet
just
crowd
to say
today.
that this will be, we will post this on the EO site, and the webinar will be available for everybody to rewatch over and over again.
Love the vest, Courtney.
Yes, thank you. I love my vest, Glenda.
I wear mine all the time. It's awesome. So, all right. Well, everybody go off and enjoy this not so sunny day, but at least in Minnesota. So, Jill, thanks again.
Great.
And
Thank
enjoy that quarantine on that island you're on.
Mahalo, I will.
Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.
All right.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Aloha.
everyone.
Bye.